Today we're with Bob Gray, located near Washington, D.C., who represents Northeast Dairy Cooperatives in Washington, work he has done for nearly 20 years. He's a popular speaker at meetings all across the Northeast, and with his staff, he issues a very informative newsletter every week. Bob, welcome to This Week in Dairy.
Thank you, Joel. I'm very pleased to talk with you about dairy issues.
This week, the big news was the announcement that Canada has been included in the trade agreement with U.S. and Mexico, the USMCA agreement, or NAFTA 2.0. What's the good news for U.S. dairy?
Well, generally speaking, Joel, the news is that on the NAFTA agreement with Canada, or the MCA agreement, USMCA agreement, that it's a positive step forward because, as you know, and when Canada moved to implement their Class 6 actually, and Class 7 pricing system, they shut us out of the market for ultra-filtered high milk, protein milk, and that caused us to lose markets both in the state of Wisconsin as well as New York that we had built over the years. And in the Northeast, for example, we lost 300 million pounds of annual sales of milk in 2 of our plants in the Northeast, and that milk came back on our domestic market. So one of the things that this agreement with Canada does is eliminate that Class 7 sales, and it also starts to move Canada away from subsidizing non-fat dry milk powder and other products that they've been subsidizing, although the devil is in the details in terms of how that's going to work out in the long run. But Canada has been subsidizing the sales of these products as well and undercutting our export sales in other markets, Joel.
We know that the House and Senate, Congress, has to ratify this bill. When do you suppose, how are they going to take up this work, and when do you suppose that might happen?
Well, once these agreements are finalized with Mexico and Canada, this new agreement, then it will be sent back to Congress for ratification. And of course, it has to be approved in both Canada and Mexico. And I see that the Canadian farmers are not very happy. They're very angry. So in some ways, that shows that they feel that this agreement from their side was much better for the U.S., but it has to be ratified in Congress. And it would the clock would start ticking on this to do something in the lame duck session. Now, a lot of that's going to be determined by the outcome of the midterms. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if this is kicked over into 2019 in the new Congress that will convene in January, Joel.
We've heard some concern by processors that the tariffs on U.S. dairy imposed earlier by Mexico still remain in place, effectively making it very difficult still for U.S. dairy companies to sell into that important market. What can you tell us about the situation with the tariffs?
That is correct. These tariffs, as you know, we imposed tariffs on Mexico for aluminum and steel, and they imposed tariffs on us, retaliated with tariffs on certain cheeses at 25%, and that has really hurt sales into Mexico. And as you know, when we had the NAFTA agreement approved way back in '94, we were selling almost nothing into Mexico. And over the years, that's been 25% of our export sales, $1.2 billion, and it's been huge for the U.S. So this imposition of 25% tariffs on certain cheeses has hurt our sales, and we've lost the markets there. Now, the details of that my understanding is, in terms of finalizing the trade deal with Mexico, have not been worked out. So there's bargaining there between these steel and aluminum tariffs, and that may be worked out, and these tariffs on cheeses may be dropped, but that is an issue right now.
We continue to have trade conflicts, of course, with another big customer for U.S. dairy, China. The high tariffs remain in place there, making it very difficult for our U.S. processors to sell into that market. What can you tell us about the status with China?
Well, China is going to be, that's going to be a very interesting trade agreement, and how that's going to be worked out is going to be quite interesting. We have been selling a lot of product into China over the years, non-fat dry milk, skim powder, even whole milk powder, infant formula. One of our co-ops here in the Northeast has a whey powder products that they've been selling into China. So it's been very, very a good market for us over the years. Now, China depends, though, the key here in bargaining is China depends a lot more on products that they're selling into the U.S., over $500 billion worth of products than we sell into China. And of course, what the administration has done is putting tariffs on a lot of their products and are claiming they are going to increase that. So in a sense, that if the tariffs are increased on a huge number of Chinese products coming into the U.S., it's going to hurt China's economy much more than it is the U.S. So the issue will be whether or not that's going to bring China more to the bargaining table to complete this agreement. But as you know, it's hurt soybean sales, it's hurt pork sales, as well as dairy. But that's going to be very interesting as how this plays out in the months ahead.
We've heard from dairy companies that they are hoping that with NAFTA 2.0 under our belts, we can quickly move to begin working with bilateral trade agreements in other parts of the world, Asia and other international markets. They are very much hoping that the playing field can be leveled. What can you tell us about the U.S. trade activities moving into other regions beyond NAFTA?
I couldn't agree more. We've got to get involved in a lot more bilateral agreements. So my understanding is we're already talking to Japan. Japan has been very difficult to get into their dairy market, but my understanding is they're not producing enough dairy products internally for their own population. They've been short of butter and other products, so there may be an opening there, but these bilateral agreements are very important. With the EU, I think that's going to be very difficult, particularly on the genetically modified products, because as you know, the EU has very stringent requirements on GMOs. So it's going to be much more difficult for us to make some kind of an agricultural agreement with them because of their, their problems with utilizing GMO products in the EU. But I think overall, we've got to start to put more and more bilateral agreements together.
We'll change the subject for just a moment. We know that the Farm Bill has not been approved. October 1 has come and gone. We've got the midterm elections coming up. How do you see a Farm Bill working its way through Congress? And is one of the possibilities that we'll simply see an extension of the current legislation for some period of time? Where are we with the Farm Bill?
Well, I thought that there might be an agreement on this. As you know, the biggest holdup has been the SNAP work requirement. Even though there are 17 states out of the 50 states that do have rather stringent SNAP work requirements, but there's several other states that have various waivers on SNAP work requirements. So, but the House, Congressman Conway, the chairman of the House Ag Committee, is holding very tough on these SNAP work requirements of 20 hours a week in order to be eligible for food stamps. So it looks like this is going to come right down to the wire, and he's already talking about a reauthorization of the 2014 Farm Bill on over into 2019. And as you know, in the past, we have never hit the Farm Bill for the year that it was supposed to be done. And it's got to be reauthorized by the December 31st, or we revert back to the 1949 Act. So it looks right now, the way both sides are playing this, that we are going to see a reauthorization. I'm not sure they're going to be able to work this out in the lame duck session. And with perhaps a change in the House goes Democratic, that'll mean even more unlikely that they'll get a deal worked out in December.
Well, thank you, Bob. We've been speaking with Bob Gray, longtime representative of the Northeast Dairy Cooperatives in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for your insights, Bob.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciated talking to you.